Good morning. This is Sunday, April 19th. Welcome to the Unity of Kanawha Valley Sunday service, coming to you through Zoom, YouTube, and a little bit later today, Facebook Live. We start our service with the lighting of the Christ candle and the ringing of the bell. Rich, if you would unmute Mary Beth so that Freddie can ring the bell, I will light the Christ candle. Ring the bell, please, Freddie. Ring it really loud. Good job, good job. We ring the bell and we light the Christ candle as a reminder of the Christ light that shines in each and every one of us. So if you would, take a moment to center yourself and say with me our opening statement. There is only one presence and one power active in my life, God, the good, omnipotent. And sit with that thought for just a moment. Allow those words to anchor into your heart. And let's say them once more together. There is only one presence and one power active in my life, God, the good, omnipotent. And so it is. Now we will have our songs.
Good morning. I hope all of you are well and safe, and look forward to seeing your smiling faces in person. But Jeff and I are here to carry on here, so we're going to start off with Surely the Presence. Surely the presence of the Lord is in this place. I can feel his mighty power and his grace. I can hear the brush of angels' wings. I see glory on his face. Surely the presence of the Lord is in this place. Surely the presence of the Lord is in this place. I can feel her mighty power and her grace. There's a holy hush around us. I see glory on his face. Surely the presence of the Lord is in this place. And now we're going to do In Heavenly Love Abiding. In heavenly love abiding, no change my heart shall fear, and safe is such confiding, for nothing changes here. The storm may roar without me, my heart may low be laid, but God is round about me, and can I be dismayed? not seen. Bright skies will soon be o'er me, where darkest skies have been. My hope I cannot measure, my path to life is free. My God has been my treasure, and He will walk with me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron and Jeff. We don't actually have announcements because there are no activities going on at the church right now. However, Pam does send out a weekly email. If you would like to join that list, just send us your email address, and we will add you so that you are up to date with what's going on at the church. And now I will turn it over to Sky.
Thank you so much, Janet. Thank you, everybody. It's great to see you. I want to say welcome, shalom, assalamu alaikum, namaste, aloha. Welcome, everyone, to our service today in this strange period of COVID-19. My name is Sky Kirshner. The light in me greets the light in you. I want to welcome you to Unity of Kanawha Valley online. Thank you for joining us from wherever you are. The purpose of Unity of Kanawha Valley is to provide you with a welcome community of love, acceptance, and spiritual growth. It's my personal goal that you feel safe while you're here with us today, that you feel free to be yourself, and that you feel free to explore some ideas that might be useful in your life. Today, we will be considering the mystical roots of the teachings of Jesus. The mystical roots of the teachings of Jesus. If you want to know more about Unity, check out our website, which you've probably been doing. If you want to know more about how to be involved or how to become a member, contact me by email, skykirshner@gmail.com. Prayer is a central part of what we're about here, so let's do that right now. Would you soften your gaze? Close your eyes if you feel comfortable. Let yourself smile and say silently to yourself, at all times and in all places, God is my source and my strength. At all times and in all places, God is my source and my strength. And if you want to, you can give yourself a nice yawn and stretch. If you happen to be in bed, you're halfway there. Just give yourself a nice yawn and stretch right wherever you are. If you're by yourself, imagine that you're touching the shoulder of someone you love. If you're with someone, go ahead and give them a nice hug or pat or touch on the shoulder. And would you say to them, in your mind's eye or live, thank you for being with me on this journey. God is your strength too. Thank you for being with me on this journey. God is your strength too. I want to thank each of you for not being here again today. Your not being here is part of how we're trying to help our community by staying safe and by preventing a flood of folks getting the virus. So I really appreciate everyone practicing social distancing, safe distancing, physical distancing. Your being here, wherever you are today, is part of the world that we're creating. Every small thing you do makes a difference. I want to thank the universe, God, the source of all life and love, for another day on this amazing journey. I want to thank everyone who made this service possible, for Pam and for Blue, for Stephen and our board, for Ron and Ryan and Jeff, for Janet, our worship leader today, for Rich. Where would we be without, well, we wouldn't be here without Rich. Rich has been putting in countless hours getting the sound, getting the music. Music is so important for us, and we're all here together, and we really appreciate that. For our prayer chaplains, Janet and Kate and Marianne and Sharon. For our daily word reader today, who I think will be Janet. And for our junior bell ringer today, Freddie, thank you for ringing our bell. It's always good to have you rang it so loud. That was fantastic. So thank you, everyone. Before we go into our time of prayer this morning, I just want to check in with you about names and situations that you might be concerned about or grateful for. Go ahead and put those in the chat if you would like, and I'll read them off as I see them coming up in the chat. So names, people you're concerned about, people you want to give gratitude for. In our daily daily discussion, we've been lifting up all sorts of folks on the front line, the grocery store clerks, the folks at all the hospitals and healthcare centers who are so courageous, going in, taking care of themselves as best they can. We remember those folks in healthcare who have contracted the virus because they did not practice social distancing, because they felt a calling to be there for others. And we remember those who are isolated, those who are alone, those family members who are unable to be with their loved one who may be positive with the virus, who may be in the hospital. And we remember specific people today. We remember Jordan. We remember Tom Whitehead coping with the loss of his mother. We remember Teresa, Scotland, Marcia, Jill, and Larry. I remember Jonathan, my friend here in Charleston, who has the virus. Remember Ruth's husband and her family. For Bobby Clovis, who lost his father and uncle this past week. So many losses. Not so many here in our community, certainly in our country, in our nation. Is the number over 20,000 folks, maybe 30,000? Rich, hold up a hand. 30,000, 20,000, 30,000, over 30,000 folks. And we have been lucky so far, and we appreciate everybody practicing how to keep our community as safe as possible. The wave is still coming, and we remember everyone who has suffered a loss, experienced a loss, and we are with you in this time. Kate writes, please keep the patients and care workers of Eastbrook Nursing Home. Greg's mother is there and has tested negative so far. The caregivers are doing such a good job, right? This is the nursing home with the highest number of cases in Kanawha County. Kanawha County is still increasing. We're up at 111, I believe. So still increasing. We have not peaked yet. We thought we were going to, and then maybe people relaxed, started going out again. And Julie Wellstead, newly diagnosed with cancer. Laura's mother, who's 93, who's living on her own in Northwest Indiana. Laura usually goes out to see her every month, but is unable to because of the lockdown. And for Chris, who is a nurse. So with all of these folks that we've named and all those folks we have not named, let's lift these folks up right now. And let's join in the beauty of this present moment. Whatever sound you have in the room. I don't hear the birds right now. I'm in the sanctuary, but I hear the creaking of the pews as the sun is hitting on them and warming them. Whatever sounds you hear, wherever you are, just notice them. You might notice the sound and the experience of breathing. We do not take breathing for granted this week. We know that every breath is a gift, maintained and supported by the spirit of life within us. We know this entire world is supported by the Spirit of God. God infuses everything, everyone, in every place. And so as we are aware of our breathing, we notice this circulation, this exchange, this giving and receiving. As we take the breath in, let the breath out. This seems to be the way of the world, the way of the universe. Things expand, things contract. Things increase, things decrease. Things come alive, and things pass away. We hold on, and we let go. And as we sit or stand with this experience of breathing, we remember the words of Jesus, who said, "Seek ye the kingdom." The kingdom is within. It is at hand. It is among you. It is in your midst. It is here. And so we contemplate the meaning of these words. And we experience within ourselves the truth that all abundance is within us, that everything we need is here and now. All abundance, all sufficiency, all good, all that is necessary. We consider that this place, this realm within us, is a place of healing, a place of wholeness, a place of cure, yes, and also a place of acceptance of what is. The God Spirit that infuses each cell in our bodies can bring us to wholeness, is bringing us to wholeness right now. Is supporting our resiliency. And we remember that this realm within us is a place of relationship, a place of love and connection, a place of forgiveness and reconciliation, a place where hearts are mended, where relationships are restored, where all is forgiven and all is well. A place where we remember that everyone is doing the best they can be doing with what they've been given, including ourselves. And this is a place of guidance, a place of intelligence, a place of wisdom, a place where access to the understandings and acceptance of the world and of our place in it, what is given us to do, a place where we can access this in the still small voice that speaks to us when we listen. And it's from this place that we remember anyone, anywhere, in any need or trouble, those living in pain, both physical and emotional, those living in fear, those who are alone or isolated, those acting with courage, those whose lives have become unmanageable, and those who are in recovery. We remember us all. And we know that the consciousness of God's presence is available and possible to all people in all times and all places with no exceptions. And we invite you to open yourself to that consciousness right now, that God is with you, here and now.
The daily word for today is understanding. I open myself to spiritual understanding. When I feel frustrated by a personal or professional challenge, or feel unsafe or concerned about a situation or event, I seek greater understanding. When I try to understand, I open my heart. Maybe I just need to gather more information or request the advice of someone I trust. If I am in conflict with someone, I practice understanding by listening with a curious mind and loving heart. I grow in spiritual understanding when I discern and heed my inner guidance. Beyond conscious thought, spiritual truth begins to illuminate my consciousness. As I release all that stands in the way of understanding and stand firm in the love that calls it forth, I am guided by my growing spiritual understanding. From Psalms 119, 144, your decrees are righteous forever. Give me understanding that I may live.
Hey Unity fam.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning. Mira and Chuck here from the Sea, and we are singing to you from a Troy, New York, in our apartment, our home to your home. And this is a song that Chuck wrote called Battened Hatches. And we thought it was a good song to sing right now because it reminds us that we are all in this together and that we have everything that we need.
We miss y'all. Candlesticks and battened hatches, a deck of cards and waterproof matches. We'll sail on through the storm, come what may. We've got all we need, no reason to be afraid. When the world's been raining, 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 cats and dogs. When the world's been flooding, flooding, all the dry land is gone. And all we've got left is each other and this boat we're on. I'll give a kiss and bat those lashes. And I'll check the knots and find where the flask is. Our clothes are warm, we'll stay warm, come what may. We've got all we need, no reason to complain. When the world's been raining, 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 cats and dogs. When the world's been flooding, flooding, all the dry land is gone. And all we've got left is each other and this boat we're on. Love you.
Wow, Mira and Chuck, you guys blow us away. That was amazing. Every year, better and better. Rich, thank you so much. The sound on that was incredible. We are so lucky to be here today. Well, I want to say, I want to tell a little story because I always tell a story in the beginning. So the nun was working at a local healthcare agency, and she was making her rounds, visiting all the people that were shut in. And these days, we certainly know what that's like and how important that is. And as luck would have it, she ran out of gas. And she was about a block from the gas station. She could see it there. And so she walked over to the gas station to see if she could borrow a can to get enough gas to start the car and drive to the station and fill it up. You know how that goes. You remember the good old days when we used to do that. The attendant told her that they didn't have a can, that somebody had just walked out with it because they were in a similar situation, and so she'd have to wait until he returned and the can came back. And she didn't want to wait. She had a lot of folks to go visit, and so she went back to her car to see if she could find something to put the gas in. What she found was a bedpan. She was about to deliver the bedpan to the next person, and so she decided, well, this will work. So she took the bedpan to the gas station and filled it up with gas and went back to her car and started pouring the gas in using the bedpan. And two men were walking by and they saw this, and the one man turned to the other and said, "Now that's what I call faith." Would you put your hands on your heart, please, and repeat after me? This is my heart. Through it, I am connected to my neighbor, to my source, and to myself. I'm learning to trust it in all things, and I am grateful. Amen. Well, I have an interesting story to tell you about Jesus today. I'm very excited to tell it. I've been reading this book, Rabbi Jesus. As you know, Jesus, of course, was a Jewish mystic. Probably wasn't intending to start a religion. There were some folks a couple hundred years later who kind of got things organized and institutionalized, took it probably in a different direction. But the original story of Jesus is quite an amazing thing, and I want to offer a new way of thinking about Jesus' life, especially his young life, his boyhood, his growing up, what that was like for him. And I'm just going to make a little shift. There we go. So Jesus is what is known to the people of his day as a mamzer. M-A-M-Z-E-R. This is a word in Aramaic that refers to a child who is born who you're not quite sure who the father is. Joseph and Mary in Nazareth. Everybody knows them. Everybody knows Mary. And she's 13 or 14. That's what it means to be a maiden in those days. And she becomes pregnant. She's not married. She's engaged to a widower named Joseph. And Joseph, when he finds out that she's pregnant, he knows he's not the father and is distressed by this. And as with Mary, an angel appears to him in a dream and says, "It's okay, hang in there, stay with Mary." And so he does. They get married, but everybody in town knows that Mary was pregnant before they got married. And I'm going to move that back again because I like you being able to see the beautiful stained glass window in the back. So as we would say maybe illegitimate, if you were a Game of Thrones fan, you remember Jon Snow. Basically, the protagonist of the story, who is the illegitimate son of one of the kings, the King of the North, and his last name reflects that he's the illegitimate son. There are many kids named with the last name of Snow, and so he does not have a claim of acceptability or acceptance. We don't think about this aspect of Jesus' life very often. We kind of look at his life through the lens of the Christian story. You know, the wise men came, the star of Bethlehem is above the stable, all these amazing things. But this probably was not his experience in his community in Nazareth. It was probably a much more difficult and challenging experience. For example, Jesus, as not having clear parentage, being Jewish, the idea that the Jewish line comes through the mother didn't happen until a number of centuries later. So who your father was made a difference in terms of whether you were considered Jewish or not. Even though Jesus was circumcised and, for all intents and purposes, as far as we would know, would be considered a full Jew, because his parentage was in question, Jesus was probably not welcome at the synagogue in Nazareth. He would not have been allowed to have gone into the synagogue. His family could go in, his brothers, there were several kids from Joseph's previous marriage before his first wife died. There were several kids afterwards with Joseph and Mary, all clear lineage, all clear patronage. But Jesus, being a mamzer, being of questionable identity, was not allowed into the synagogue in Nazareth, where he was growing up. Everyone knew him, everyone knew his story. At that time, in the Jewish tradition, and still now in some circles, the idea of purity, the idea of whether you're clean or not, the idea of whether you're following the rules or not, was extremely important. It would have been bringing an unclean contaminant into the synagogue if Jesus had entered. We're very aware of this now when we think about contamination, who is safe, who is healthy, who is not. So in that time, as we know, lepers, you know how that goes, unclean, no one would touch them, the untouchables. Jesus was in this quasi-untouchable space, not welcome in the synagogue. Everything he learns about the Jewish tradition, he is learning secondhand from his parents, from the people around him. Joseph Carpenter at Tekon brings Jesus up as an apprentice, we're guessing, in the field of carpentry. Joseph passes away somewhere around Jesus' age of 11 or 12. Passover time was a time of pilgrimage, and Jewish families, there was one place to visit in your pilgrimage, very similar to Islam now, the idea of going on a pilgrimage to Mecca, to Medina, to those cities where Muhammad lived and where Islam was born. Thousands of people would come to the temple in Jerusalem. Tens of thousands of people would come to the temple in Jerusalem. I mean, it's like the pictures we see in Islam of people walking around the Kaaba, that black box, where millions of people, 6 million people come for a week. It's, the crowd control. Disney World, Disneyland had to learn. They share information back and forth. How do you deal with these massive crowds? And we know every year in Ramadan, which starts next week, or not in Ramadan, but during the Hajj, during the pilgrimage, people are trampled to death because there is such a press at certain points in the pilgrimage choreography. Judaism had the same choreography around the temple. People would come from all over the place to come to the temple, and they would come for one thing and one thing only, to sacrifice an animal. The temple is humongous. You know, this was built, if you think about the pyramids without the pyramid on top, just the base of the pyramid, the temple is, and I didn't look it up, but it's something like 20 football fields big. I mean, and it's flat. It's huge. One side for men, another side for women. In the middle is the place where they sacrifice the animals. Tens of thousands of animals being brought in, killed, burned as an offering, a burnt offering. God apparently loves the smell of barbecue. This is no joke. And so that's how that was done. Mary decides to bring her family to Jerusalem for Passover. She has an aunt. You all know who the aunts are. They live in Bethany, which is right outside of Jerusalem. The aunts are Mary and Martha. Even though they don't have a lot of money, they're going to stay with Mary and Martha and go and observe the ritual of the sacrifice. Now, you all may remember, I know I talked about this several years ago, some of you may remember, the idea of tithing comes about around these sacrifices, either in the fall or in the spring. And the idea is that you bring 1/10 of what you have. Because the pilgrimage factor is to bring an animal to the temple, if you're coming from a long distance, Nazareth is 4 days walk from Jerusalem. This is a long distance. This is a long way to go to carry an animal. And some people are coming from Damascus, weeks away. And the idea of bringing, especially if you're wealthy, bringing all these animals was not terribly practical. And so what would they do? In Galilee, which is where Nazareth is, this is the backwater of Israel. They didn't use money. They just bartered things to make their way. But money was useful for one thing. If you were going to the temple, you could sell your animal in Nazareth, carry the money to Jerusalem, and there at the temple, buy an animal that you could then use for sacrifice. This is why there were money changers in the temple. You say, why are there money changers in the temple? Well, this is why, because people are coming from all different places in the world with all different denominations of money to buy animals that they can use in the sacrifice. They sold the animals 2 weeks ago in one country. They bring it with their local money. They exchange the money in the temple, and they buy the new animal that's going to be used for sacrifice. The other thing that was essential, so one of the things was that you lay your hand on the animal that's being sacrificed on your behalf. This was the idea of becoming clean, becoming pure. The sacrifice was for the forgiveness of sins. The other thing that was for the forgiveness of sins was immersion, that you would bathe in order to be clean, not just physically, but you would be clean spiritually. So around the temple were different baths, and people would go and they'd have to pay money to do these baths. One of them still exists, the one by the sheep gate. You can if you go there, you see the ruins of it. It's like the pictures you've seen of people in the Ganges River. Same kind of deal. Steps going down, steps going out. A lot of people, tens of thousands of people. Before you can go into the temple, you have to be clean, you have to be pure. The way you do that is through immersion. You go up to the temple, You sacrifice or you give it over to the priest sacrifices your animal, and then you go and you have a feast. This was kind of the ritual of how it would happen. I'm saying all this as a way of explaining what must have been an amazing experience for Jesus. They're 4 days away from Nazareth. Nobody in Jerusalem knows who they are. And for the first time in Jesus' life, he gets to go into a holy place. When he's in Nazareth, people know that he's not legitimate. But nobody knows that in Jerusalem. And so Mary, being the kind of mother that Mary is, says, "Come with us." Right? There was no doubt that Jesus was going to join the family in this experience. Jesus' older brother, James, probably handled the negotiation of getting the animal, but everybody walks together in that family up to the Holy of Holies. They're not allowed inside the Holy of Holies, but they're in the most amazing place in their religion. Can you imagine what that must have been like for Jesus? For the first 13 or 14 years, being denied entrance into what was considered the sacred places in his community. And now here he is, able to go in because no one's going to stop him, because nobody knows who he is. Able to go in with his family into the most amazing temple of their religion. I was thinking about this and thinking about what this must have been like, and I remembered my father. I spoke about him a couple weeks ago. My father was born illegitimate, right? My grandmother and grandfather, before they got married, did that deed that resulted in her getting pregnant. When she got pregnant, in those days, you do the right thing and you get married. But getting married was not a happy burden for apparently either of them, but especially for my grandfather. He apparently, from the stories I've heard, resented my grandmother for having gotten herself pregnant. Of course, the woman gets blamed, you know how that is. And so my father is born and he is resented by my grandfather. He is not acceptable in my grandfather's eyes. And he's allowed in church, of course, but he always has this sense of not being enough. As an adult, he moves to Washington, D.C., marries my mom who is Irish Catholic. And what church do they settle on? They settle on the Episcopal Church. And why do they settle on the Episcopal Church? Well, my guess is because living in Washington, D.C., the most amazing architectural church is the National Cathedral. And my father, out of his sense of illegitimacy, I think, discovered at the National Cathedral a sense of acceptance. He also discovered a sense of ladder climbing, because this kid who grew up not loved by his dad could find in the climbing social ladders a form of acceptance. And so where am I baptized when I am newly born in Washington, D.C.? I'm baptized in the National Cathedral, right? Because that was the highest of the high churches in town. And so we can imagine Jesus coming into the highest of the high temples in the entire land of Jerusalem, having this experience of not having been good enough back in Nazareth, and coming up and feeling fully what it's like to be Jewish, feeling fully like he is accepted, feeling scared, feeling excited, and being amazed at how huge this place is. Absolutely enormous. All of this stuff going on, and he and his family go. They turn their sheep or their lamb or their goat over to the priest, and the priest does the sacrificial act, the slaughter. And they feel wonderful afterwards. We know this, or we're guessing this, because Jesus abandons his family when it's time to go back to Nazareth. You may remember this, that they were ready to go, and they couldn't find Jesus when they were ready to leave Mary and Martha's house to go back to Nazareth. And they started searching for him. And where did they find him? You remember this. You've seen the little cartoony pictures, the artistic renderings of Jesus teaching in the temple as a boy. He does not want to leave. And you may remember that Mary and his brothers come and say, "Come on, we're going." And he says, "I am in my Father's house." And they are amazed that Jesus is getting along so well with the teachers and the rabbis, and he feels completely at home there. Now in Luke, the story says that he went back to Nazareth with his family. But there are a number of doubts about that, and there is a different reading of this story that says that Jesus did not go back, that he refused to go back because he was in the place where he felt accepted for the first time in his life. And so you can read this either way you want. I'm going to just lay it out in terms of this alternative story. Jesus stays in Jerusalem. No money. He's got Mary and Martha as aunts, not too far away, but doesn't want to leave because this is such an amazing place of acceptance. He's begging, basically, for food. He's spending as much time as he can up on the temple steps, but eventually the wear and tear on his body gets too much for him. And here the theory goes that he started wondering where he could go, who he could hook up with. Could he become a disciple of someone? Could he become an apprentice of someone? And he hears about John the Baptist, who is baptizing people for free down in the Jordan River, back in Galilee. And so he decides he's going to hook up with John and become a disciple of John. John is practicing and teaching immersion baptism for the forgiveness of sins. Now, and also fasting and baptism. Now, in this tradition, it's not like the Christian tradition where you practice, where you have baptism and one and you're done, right? In this tradition, you practice immersion baptism on a daily basis or a weekly basis. You have to keep doing this in order to take away any spiritual impurity. In fact, the Essenes, where the Qumran scrolls were found, practiced immersion baptism every day. You can see the tanks, the giant pools. They walk in one end, go underwater, walk out the other end. John is radical for several reasons. One, he's doing it away from the temple. And two, he's doing it for free, right? At the temple, you've got to pay to do the immersion baptism. John is out in the wilderness Anybody can come. He will facilitate the baptism. And then after the baptism, it was a picnic kind of thing. You would have a picnic. You would eat together with everyone else who's been baptized. It was as if everyone was tested for the COVID virus. Everyone was found to be fine, not symptomatic, not carrying the virus. And so what do? You have a big party because you know that you're all okay. Nobody's going to contaminate anyone else. John practiced a form of mysticism based on the story of Ezekiel. And you remember that song, if Ron was on, and Ryan and Kate, I'm sure some of you remember that song. Ezekiel saw the wheel way in the middle of the air. You remember that old song, Ezekiel saw the wheel way in the middle of the air, and the wheel and the wheel and the wheel and the wheel way in the middle of the air. So before the Kabbalah, which is what we know to be the modern Jewish mysticism, was this mysticism around what was called the Mekbah, which was this throne that was on wheels. And this is, it's called the chariot. And this is what John, in his esoteric teachings, in the mystical teachings, John the Baptist was practicing this. We know that for about 1,000 years, Jewish mystics were focusing on the Mekbah, which is the wheel within the wheel. This chariot, so the wheels are the wheels of a chariot. And the chariot is driven by seraphim. Seraphim are the angels of fire. These are the highest angels that there are. They're the ones who are standing at the gate of the Garden of Eden with the flaming swords. This is a very important image. It's important because it carries the throne. And I want to show you some pictures. I'm going to do this the old-fashioned way. But I'm just going to hold this up. So here's one rendition of the wheel in the wheel and all the fire. Can you see that? Give me a head nod if you can see that, right? And it's kind of like a gyroscope. So here's a picture of the throne up on top, and then what's called the chariot, and then the wheels. Here's probably a better one. You see these wheels within wheels, and then the throne up on top. Oh, this was funny. Here's a little motorcycle wheel within a wheel with a little, with a astronaut inside of it. And, a good old Appalachian depiction of the throne up on top. Why is this important? Well, the reason it's important is because for mainstream Judaism, the only place the throne could be was in Jerusalem. The throne of God, the Ark of the Covenant, was in the Holy of Holies. And you would have to, if you wanted access to God, you would have to go to Jerusalem, to the temple, to the Holy of Holies, to stand in front of the throne of God. So when Ezekiel has an image of the throne of God on top of wheels, this suggests a whole new thing. This suggests that the throne of God can move. This suggests that the throne of God, the presence of God, doesn't have to be located in one place, but it can roll around. You might remember when Jesus talks to the Samaritan, and they're talking about their different religions, and the Samaritan says, "I'm surprised you're talking to me because I'm a Samaritan. I believe God lives on this mountain." And Jesus says, "Ooh, Blue just walked in. That's terrified me. I hope you're not sick. I'm here by myself." So if the throne is on wheels, this means that the throne can move around. And when we think about these gyroscopic wheels, the meaning of the wheel within the wheel, and you can see they're facing all directions. The way they interpreted this is that God's presence can move in any direction. Or as we would say now with new physics, God can be all places at all times. This was an unusual notion. This was not mainstream. The idea that the throne is in one place and you have to go to it versus the throne can move around. You know about this throne on the wheels, which is called the chariot. You don't know that you know about it. But let me tell you, and let me see if we can get a head nod on this. Has anyone ever heard of the movie Chariots of Fire? Right? Chariots of Fire is referring to this chariot. This is Jesus never talks about the chariot. Why not? Because this is the secret teaching. You remember the times in the New Testament when it says, Jesus told them many other things that we cannot talk about in this book. This is the idea of what they're talking about. They're talking about the idea that God's throne can move in any direction and can be in all places at all times. The other idea, and you all know this too, does anybody remember the book Chariot of the Gods? Or the movie or the documentary, right? Chariot of the Gods that said maybe aliens came to the world and brought religion, right? That's why this one, this little, the motorcycle chariot is this idea of the gods, the aliens came and did things like the pyramids and those amazing paintings in Mexico that are hundreds of miles long. Now, to take this even further, even kind of more bizarrely, they described the dimensions of the chariot in Ezekiel. And there was a minister in the 1900s who actually built what he thought was the chariot. This is called the Ezekiel airship. It's just like somebody building a Noah's Ark in Kentucky. This was a minister in Texas. And here's the original of what it looked like. You can go to Texas and to see it. And here it is. Here are some folks. And there's a claim that it actually flew. It wasn't a controlled flight. It was the year before the Wright brothers. The Wright brothers were practicing controlled flight. But there was a lot of interesting stuff going on around Ezekiel and the idea of this wheel within a wheel. But we kind of lost track. Maybe we took it literally, and we didn't appreciate the importance of the idea that the throne of God can now be in all places at all times. As we practice from Jesus the idea that the kingdom of God is within, we are practicing this idea that the throne of God can move in all places and all times. The chariot idea. There's one. So Jesus was with John for several years, we're guessing. And at one point, in his 30s, we know he was baptized by John. We think that was a single baptism, right, for the forgiveness of sins. And then the dove comes down and the voice says, "This is my son in whom I am well pleased." But if Jesus is John's disciple, he's doing immersion baptism every day, because that was the way it worked. The way to stay pure was to keep immersing yourself. Jesus moved away from John's teaching. After John was killed, remember John was killed, was beheaded, and Jesus and the other disciples of John go into hiding. He's beheaded by Herod Antipas, who married his wife's brother, which was seen as a spiritually bad thing to do. John called him out on it, and so they hunted him down and killed him. Jesus took John's teaching of God's throne being everywhere in all directions and added one more thing. He added the idea that you did not have to be baptized to be clean. Jesus, in John's tradition, after the baptism, you would have this picnic. You would eat together with the other people who were clean. Jesus, you may remember, every time he goes into a town, he is eating with folks. And who is he eating with? He's eating with people who are not spiritually clean. He's eating with tax collectors. He's eating with prostitutes. He's eating with folks who have, there's a list of 350 things you need to do in order to be spiritual clean. He doesn't require that of his companions when he sits down to have a meal with them. He eats with them even when they have not been ritually cleansed through immersion or through making a sacrifice. Eating with anybody in those days would be like visiting with somebody now. You would only visit with someone if you were really sure that they did not have the virus, because you would be afraid of being contaminated. And so when people would sit down at a meal together, they would only do it with other folks who they knew were ritually clean. Jesus, somewhere along the line, decides that God does not operate that way. God does not practice, or Jesus does not practice spiritual discipline, spiritual distancing, right? He does not practice physical distancing from people who are spiritually unclean. He touches lepers. He talks with women, he talks with prostitutes, not that either is unclean, but that's the deal at the time, strangers. And he's sitting down at meals with folks right and left. Something happened inside him that made him decide that you did not need to do these acts of purity in order to be right with God. And I think, and I give thanks for this idea, I think give thanks for both of these ideas. The idea that God's throne is on a chariot and can move all places and all times, we would say, we would spread it out. I think, many of us would say, it's not like God can be over here, but God can be in these places simultaneously. That's why the wheel within the wheel is such a beautiful image of mystery. And on top of this, Jesus now takes it a step further. You don't need to be purified in order to be in the presence of God. In fact, you have the presence of God with you all the time. I don't know of any other way of understanding his willingness to eat and drink with folks, to hang out with folks who everyone else thought was contaminated. He did not have a sense of anyone being spiritually contaminated. He had a sense that everyone was okay, everyone was clean and pure in their spirit that they carried with them. Well, I hope this was interesting. I have one final kicker. In case you think this is like totally crazy town, oh my gosh, Sky has been isolated too much. He's like gone off the woo-woo end, as David Roth would say. He's become so open-minded, his brain has fallen out. Here's the kicker. There are 4 wheels that are moving this chariot with God's throne around. And I want to read to you the description from Isaiah that describes these 4 wheels. Every one of the wheels, or every one had 4 faces. Every one of them had 4 wings, and their legs were straight legs, and their soles were feet, as was the sole of a calf's foot, and they sparkled like burnished brass. So each one of these wheels had a face in it, and sort of a body, and the wheel was sort of alive. This is a mystical vision. They had hands of a man under their wings on their four sides. On each beast, that's on each of the wheels that had this beast, Ezekiel saw the four faces of a man, a lion, an ox, and an eagle. A man, a lion, an ox, and an eagle. So each one of these wheels, one had the face of a man, the other had the face of a lion, the other had the face of an ox, the other had the face of an eagle. I want to ask Phyllis or anyone else, if Frank is on the call, what is the significance of these four different animals or these four different symbols? The man, the ox, the lion, and the eagle. Frank?
No, I don't know. Sorry.
You don't know. Your Catholic nuns failed you. Does anyone else remember?
That's the class I probably.
There was the class you were sleeping through. The significance of these four symbols. The faces were to become the faces of the four evangelists during the 2nd century. There are four Gospels in Christianity: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are symbolized by these four symbols: the man, the ox, the eagle, and the lion. And I want to just show you, any cathedral you go to, this is from the Book of Kells. This is one of the oldest Bibles in the world. It's in Dublin. You can go to Trinity College and see it there. And here's Jesus, and here are the four evangelists. And the four evangelists, here's one, I forget which one is the lion, which one is the ox. They're in a wheel, and there are the four wheels with the four symbols from Ezekiel. If you look this up, you will see a huge description about why Luke is the ox, why John is the lion, why Matthew is the man. And you can read all sorts of symbology around how Christianity turned these four symbols of Ezekiel's wheel into the four evangelists, the four writers of the gospel. What you will miss and what you will not read is the significance that the throne had wheels on it. You will read page after page why John was the lion. But what you won't read is the significance of the idea that God's throne, God's presence, now has wheels and can move in any direction. We still carry this symbolism in Christianity without even knowing what we're doing. I hope that that's super interesting to you. I really was excited about this message. Wow, I went a long time. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Rich, you better take it back before I get myself more into trouble.
At this time, we ask that you support this ministry. You can do that online through our website, or you can send a check to the church. But we do want to join together to bless our gifts and offerings. So join with me. Divine love, moving in and through me, blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. I give in love, I trust God, and I am grateful.
Even though we're all keeping our distance, there's something that builds a bridge between each of our hearts. That's what this song's about. 2, 3, 4. desert with no shoes upon my feet, to share with you the last bite of bread I had to eat. And I would swim out to save you in your sea of broken dreams, when all your hopes are sinking. Let me show you what love means. And love can build a bridge between your heart and mine. Love can build a bridge. Don't you think it's time? Don't you think it's time? And I would whisper love so loudly every heart would understand. Love and only love can join the tribes of man. And I would give my heart's desire so that you might see. The first step is to realize it all begins with you and me. And love can build a bridge between your heart and mine. Love can build a bridge. Don't you think it's time? Don't you think it's time? And though we must keep our distance in this crisis hour, we can do anything, anything. We keep believing in the power. Love can build a bridge between your heart and mine. Love can build a bridge. Don't you think it's time? Don't you think it's time? Now love can build a bridge between your heart and mine. Love can build a bridge. Don't you think it's time? Don't you think it's time?
Thank you, Ron and Jeff. That was wonderful, wonderful. So at this time, we do give thanks for the gifts and offerings that support this church. We give thanks for the wonderful music that fills our heart with gladness. And we give thanks for messages of understanding that help us to grow. For even though we can't be together physically, we are connected, one heart to another. And we are so grateful for each and every person that participates in these services and in this ministry. So we say, thank you, thank you, thank you. And so it is. Amen. Now, Rich, I don't know, do we have birthday music? I don't know if we have any birthdays. Maybe everyone could raise their hand if anyone has a birthday.
We do not have a birthday song. I'm sorry.
Okay, well then we'll go right to our peace song. Let's go to our peace song.
Okay. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Let there be peace on earth, the peace that was meant to be, with God as creator, family all are we. Let us walk with each other in perfect harmony. Let peace begin with me. Let this be the moment now. With every step I take, let this be my joyous vow, to take each moment and live each moment in peace eternally. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Thank you. Thank you.
And now our prayer for protection. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. And the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is. All is well. Thank you, thank you, thank you to everyone for being here. We'll see you next week. And
Namaste, everyone. I'm going to stay 6 feet away. Namaste.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, Rich. In the presence of